I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. Have you ever sensed that God was calling you to do something? Have you ever wondered how God gets your attention? Have you ever regretted having an idea and then not taking action on it? If you have, then you understand how intuition is used by the Spirit to lead us. I'm going to talk today about recognizing spiritual intuition and the power of taking immediate action on it. All this and more on the Rob Skinner Podcast. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. I'm looking to hire a campus minister for this upcoming school year, and I'm offering a $2,000 a month stipend to a young man who'd be interested in leading our campus ministry this upcoming year. I'd be working with you directly on the campus at the University of Arizona. We have a campus ministry of about 10 people. It's a great group of people. And so if you're interested or know of someone who'd be interested, please contact me at rob@robskinner.com. That's rob@robskinner.com. While we're talking about missions, I talked about how I went earlier in the month to Stockton, California with some church leaders to scout out a potential mission planting in Stockton, California. If you have an interest in that, in a future planting there, if you'd like to go on a team or actually lead the mission planting, please contact me, rob@robskinner.com. We're in the exploratory stage trying to figure out, is it God's will that we get a church planting going right now? So please contact me, rob@robskinner.com, if you or someone you know has a connection or interest in getting a church going in Stockton, California. I really appreciate you listening to the Rob Skinner Podcast. I tell you what, it is so encouraging when I see people. I get a little bored. I can tell who's been listening, not by name or anything, but just around the world. And it's just so encouraging to me to know I can help people. I mean, it's super, super uplifting. If you feel like you're benefiting from the program, I'd like to ask you to support it with a gift, because your support enables me to multiply disciples, leaders, and churches and inspire others to do the same through this podcast. For example, the funding for this campus minister came from a donor to the podcast. I mean, it's just amazing. I lead a church. It's a little over 100 people, but the funding for this campus minister is coming from a listener to the podcast, and I really appreciate it. This trip that we took to scout out Stockton, California, the funds for that came from a listener, and it really makes a difference in advancing the gospel of Christ. So if you'd like to support, all you need to do is go to the show notes. There's a link to support the program. Super easy. Really appreciate your support. Today I'm talking about acting immediately on your intuition. Ralph Waldo Emerson said this: "The primary wisdom is intuition. In that deep force, the last fact behind which analysis cannot go, all things find their origin." I really need to take more showers. Now, it has nothing to do with how dirty I am, but how many ideas come to me while I'm in the shower. I need a waterproof writing pad in the shower because so many ideas float to the surface of my mind while I space out in the warm water. Shaving also seems somehow connected to coming up with amazing ideas. I've wondered to myself if the shower and my bathroom sink are holy ground. I've literally looked up and wondered if there's some type of spiritual portal between earth and heaven on that very spot. All because I get so many ideas, intuitive thoughts, and nudges by God's Spirit when I'm in those locations. How does God communicate with us? Obviously, we can't see him physically. We can't touch him. We can't hear his physical voice. We know he talks to us through his word, and we talk to him through prayer. I believe God also talks to us through our intuition. He taps our shoulder through the Spirit living in us when a unique thought pops into our mind either once or repeatedly. John chapter 14, verse 26 says, "But the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and will remind you of everything I have said to you." You are a spiritual being. Jesus gave each disciple his Spirit to guide us, teach us, and lead us. How does the Spirit do those things? I think he has many tools to get our attention. The Word, coincidence, conscience, powerful preaching, and intuition. God spoke to the prophets in dreams and visions. He guided Paul through his dream of a man from Macedonia. I think God guides us through our intuition or inner sight. We may have an idea that seems crazy, but keeps coming to us over and over again. Shortly after becoming a Christian, I went home for Christmas to my hometown of Ashland, Oregon. I went out for a prayer walk and prayed and cried that someday there'd be a strong church in that small town of 20,000 people. 18 years later, after I'd been overseas for 10 years and returned to the U.S., a thought came to my mind. Plant a church in your hometown now. It came with increasing frequency. I started to notice it. I'd put it aside and tell myself why it was a crazy thought. I gradually connected my prayer from 18 years earlier to my current situation. God was using me to answer my own prayer. I sat down and told my wife, Pam, I want to plant a church in Ashland. 3 months later, we had our 2 moving trucks stuffed to the rafters, and we were on our way to plant a church there, a mission team of 2 adults and 3 kids. I believe that the Spirit uses our thoughts, ideas, and intuition to guide us if we'll just listen, pay attention, and act on those promptings. Spiritual guidance or satanic whisper. Not every thought comes from God. We have to be clear that we are bombarded with thousands of random thoughts every day. Satan introduced a thought to the mind of Eve and brought down the whole world. So how do we screen out thoughts introduced by Satan and those originating in God's will? I think it starts by asking ourselves simple questions. First, does this idea fit with what the Bible tells me? Does this thought lead towards sin? Does this thought appeal to my sinful nature or to my higher spiritual nature? If I act on this, will it advance God's kingdom? Will it help me and others if I choose to do it? We get cued or triggered daily to lust, to proud thoughts, to sarcastic comebacks, and other evil thoughts and actions. All it takes is a moment to take captive that thought, bring it to the forefront of our mind, and either reject it or make it obedient to Christ and His will. As Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Evil temptations and triggers can be relatively easy to spot if we're looking carefully. What's more difficult is evaluating thoughts that are neither right nor wrong. These ideas may be new, they may appear crazy or unprecedented, they may not fit with your current life and comfortable situation. For example, you may have the following thoughts pop into your head. Man, I'd like to go overseas and do missionary work. I'd like to go blank and join or start a new church. I'd like to change jobs so that I can be more effective spiritually. I'd like to retire and move here or there to preach the word. I'd like to try out the full-time ministry. When thoughts like these arise, it's important not to simply bat them away or throw them off. Instead, tell yourself, don't tell yourself why you can't do it or why it won't work. The Spirit may be teeing up for you an idea to drive down that course. Instead, look for more evidence that God may be trying to get your attention. How do you know? The thought or idea keeps returning unbidden. Weird coincidences happen that make the thought come to mind or make the idea more realistic. Someone else mentions the idea out of the blue. You read something in the Bible that points to that thought. You hear a sermon that convicts you about the very thing you've been thinking about. You hear of someone else doing or attempting the very thing you'd like to do. Circumstances change that make what you previously considered impossible a possibility. In 2003, my church went through a shakeup that changed the way my church and related churches were guided. All of a sudden, there was no longer a master plan for future plantings and development. It seemed like there was no one in charge any longer. That change of circumstance provided the opportunity for me to plant a church in a town that wasn't on anyone's master plan previously. When circumstances changed, I realized God had opened a door to see my prayer realized. Take action immediately. I would guess that there are at least one or two ideas that have rolled around in the back of your mind for months, years, and even decades. That idea keeps making an appearance and then gets shot down by your rational, reasoning, careful, protective thought process. We treat the promptings of the Spirit like a child that wants us to come play with him or her. We tell the child, we'll do it later, not now, it's not a good time, I'm too busy, or some other excuse. At some point, that child will stop asking. At that point, it'll be too late. We'll be too old to act on a dream God has placed in our mind. As Emerson writes in Self-Reliance, a man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. Yet he dismisses without notice his thought because it's his own. In every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. Great works of art have no more affecting lesson for us than this. They teach us to abide by our spontaneous impression with good-humored inflexibility than most when the whole cry of voices is on the other side. Else tomorrow a stranger will say with masterly good sense precisely what we have thought and felt all the time, and we shall be forced to take with shame our own opinion from another. He's reminding us how important it is to pay attention to the Spirit's prompting within us, our intuition. We tend to discount our own thoughts and ideas as less valuable than others simply because it comes from ourselves. If we keep on ignoring our intuition, we'll hear about our idea or our achievement spoken of or accomplished by another person, and then we'll kick ourselves when it happens. We'll scold ourselves saying, I could have done that, I could have said that, I could have accomplished that. I had that idea long ago. You had the intuition, but you didn't act on it. That's what Emerson is saying. And I think this is what Paul means when he writes in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 19, do not quench the Spirit. Merriam-Webster defines quench as to put out the light or fire of something, to cool or to cause to lose heat or warmth, to terminate by or as if by destroying. God is always trying to light a fire in us to fulfill his amazing purpose for our lives. He's trying to bring passion, zeal, and heat through his Spirit into our lives. Unfortunately, when we ignore, suppress, and disregard the Spirit's promptings, we are effectively quenching the Spirit, cooling our zeal, and terminating the amazing plans God has for us. Take action immediately. As long as you're alive, there's time to fan into flame the gift of God. And that's what Paul told Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 6. How do you do that? Take action on the Spirit's promptings. Write down what the Spirit is putting on your heart. What thought or idea has been nagging at you for years? What would you like to do that you put off for too long? Write it down, and then write down 3 things you could do today to move you in that direction. Don't worry about having a complete plan. Just move in the Spirit's direction. You'll be guided if it's God's will. I think about Kevin and Erica Liu. They left the mission field from China. They went back to Texas. They called me one day during COVID and said, we'd like to help you out in your work in planting that church in Flagstaff or helping in Tucson. They moved to Tucson 3 years ago, and they were just incredible, helping us to revive the campus ministry. Just an amazing support couple. I mean, just fantastic. I just can't thank them enough for all the work that they've done on God's behalf. But Kevin has always had it on his heart. He wants to go overseas. He wants to continue the overseas mission. And that thought never left him. I mean, just as long as I discipled him over the past 3 years, he would talk about it. It would come back. It would resurface. And then for a while I go, no, we've got small kids and stuff like that. But bottom line, he listened to this intuition, and now he just left to go on Revive EE, and he left in this month, and he'll be spending at least a year there in Eastern Europe to do the work of God. But the thing I appreciated about it is he recognized it. He took captive that thought, and we talked about it. I would love to keep him in Tucson for as long as he's willing to stay, but I just talked to him. I said, listen, you gotta go with it. That's the spirit. That's not going to go away. It keeps coming back. You need to act on it. And he did. And that's what I appreciate about it. He could have told himself, hey, it's too hard. I've got small kids. He has kids under the age of 5. I think they're, it's real young kids. But he decided, I'm going to go for it. And they both decided to do it. And I think that's a great example of acting on your intuition. I wrote down, I want to raise $5,000 for charity this year as one of my goals on New Year's Day while living in Japan in the 90s. A thought popped immediately into my mind. How can I raise not $5,000, but $50,000? I don't know where that thought came from. I mean, I thought $5,000 was a lot. That'd be huge. But then I thought, well, how about $50,000? I don't know where the thought came from. But I wrote down some ideas and then thought, I'd have to do a charity run or something. That was the beginning of the Run for Hope that raised $50,000 that year, and in its third year raised $150,000 for charity. We sent it to the Sihanouk Hospital in Cambodia, and it was awesome. But it all started with an idea, intuition, and the Spirit's prompting. I remember sitting in a chair in Ron and Nancy Markham's house there in Tokyo when we celebrated the first Run for Hope. I remember the feeling of complete peace and satisfaction at having listened to the Spirit's prompting to do something that helped so many people. It was and remains a high point for me. I'm glad I took action on that idea. Now it's your turn. Practicals. Write down what your intuition is pointing you to do. Next, write down 3 action steps you can take this week to move you in that direction. Finally, start praying that God brings that idea to fruition. Thanks for listening. Here's how you can help support the program. First, let your friends know about it. Just say, hey, listen to the Rob Skinner podcast. Maybe text them a link. Secondly, read and review one of my books, How to Plant and Grow a Church, or Courage, How to Make This Life Count. You can find them on Amazon.com. Finally, support the program with a gift today. The link is in the show notes. Because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no-regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day, and make this life count.